the night Elias Crowder found her. The storm had erased the road, the fences, and nearly the world itself, turning the valley into a white grave that swallowed sound and hope alike. And if he hadn't gone out to check on his dying neighbor, old Thomas Hale, who lay coughing his last breaths in a shack half buried by snow, he would have never seen the shape near the mailbox, a human form slumped against a drift, barely distinguishable from the frozen earth. And for one terrifying moment Elias thought it was Thomas, already dead and dragged outside by wolves. But as he stepped closer, lantern shaking in his gloved hand, he saw a woman's face beneath a thin veil of ice. Lips blue, eyelashes crusted white, arms wrapped around herself as if she were trying to hold her soul inside her body. She wore a travel coat far too light for the winter, foreign in cut and color, and clutched a leather satchel like it was the last thing tethering her to life. And when Elias knelt and pressed his fingers to her neck, he felt it, a pulse, weak but stubborn, like a candle refusing to die. His heart slammed against his ribs because Thomas had spoken of a mail-order bride only days before. A woman from across the ocean promised a new life, and Elias had warned him winter was no time for such things. But Thomas had laughed between coughs and said loneliness was colder than any storm. And now here she was, abandoned between a dead man's dream and a living man's choice. Elias didn't hesitate, not even when the wind howled like a warning. He lifted her, shockingly light, onto his shoulder and trudged back toward his cabin, every step a battle against the drifts, his breath burning, his legs screaming, the woman murmuring words he couldn't understand, her voice thin as cracking ice. And when he finally slammed his door shut behind them, the storm felt like it was trying to claw its way inside, furious that its prey had been stolen. Elias laid her by the fire, stripped off her frozen coat, wrapped her in wool blankets that still smelled of pine smoke and solitude, rubbing her hands until feeling crept back into them inch by inch, and only then did he notice the bruises on her wrists, the fear etched deeper than cold into her face, and the envelope in her satchel bearing Thomas Hale's name and a date from weeks ago unopened, meaning no one had been waiting for her at all. Hours later, as dawn bled pale light through the frost-cracked window, she finally opened her eyes and stared at Elias like a trapped animal, and in a trembling accent she whispered the word that shattered his understanding of the night. "He is dead, yes?" And when Elias nodded, she turned her face to the wall and wept without sound, tears soaking into the blanket like secrets the snow had tried to bury. And in that moment, Elias realized this was no simple act of kindness, no quick rescue to be forgotten, because fate had dragged a broken stranger into his lonely life, and whatever came next would change them both forever. So if you feel that tightening in your chest right now, stay with this story, because what follows will test the meaning of mercy, courage, and love itself. And if stories like this move you, don't forget to subscribe, because this is only the beginning. Her name was Anya Volkov, and the truth came out slowly, like frost melting from a window, revealing horrors Elias never expected, because Anya hadn't simply been delayed by the storm. She had been abandoned on purpose, left at the station by men hired to escort her, men who took her money, laughed at her broken English, and drove away as snow swallowed the tracks. And she had walked for 2 days following a hand-drawn map Thomas had mailed months ago, trusting a man she had never met, because the alternative was returning to a life of hunger and fear. And when she finally reached his property, she found the house silent, the door open, and Thomas already dead in his bed, eyes staring at a ceiling he would never see again. And in shock and panic she fled into the storm, believing she was cursed, believing death followed her like a shadow. Elias listened in silence as she spoke, his jaw tightening with every word, because guilt settled on him like ash. He had known Thomas was dying, had known no bride would arrive in time, and had done nothing to stop the letters. And now Anya paid the price. Days passed as the storm eased, and Elias insisted she stay until she recovered, though whispers spread fast in a valley where loneliness sharpened suspicion, and when men rode up claiming Anya belonged to them, that they were owed compensation for delivery. Elias stood in his doorway with a rifle he hoped he wouldn't have to use, heart pounding as he declared she was under his protection. And the shock that followed was not the men backing down, but Anya stepping forward, voice steady for the first time, declaring she was not property, not cargo, not a bargain. And something in Elias shifted then, because he saw not a rescued woman, but a survivor who refused to freeze again. Nights grew quieter, And between shared meals and long silences, trust formed, fragile and real, until the day Thomas's relatives arrived demanding Anya be sent away, claiming she was a reminder of shame. And when Elias refused, they threatened him with ruin, isolation, and worse. But Elias had lived alone long enough to know fear was just another kind of cold, and he would not let it take her. The valley watched, waiting for Elias to fail, for Anya to disappear, but instead they saw her working beside him, planting early seeds, mending fences, learning the land as if she had always belonged. And the shock came not from scandal, but from change, because kindness proved louder than cruelty. And when spring finally broke the snow's grip, the truth became impossible to ignore. Anya was no longer freezing, no longer afraid, and Elias was no longer alone. If this chapter stirred something in you, remember to subscribe, because the final chapter reveals the moment that stunned the entire valley. The real shock came the morning the letter arrived, bearing a foreign seal, announcing that Anya's family, long believed dead, had survived the famine, and now sought her return, and the valley expected her to leave, expected Elias to be abandoned as Thomas had been. But Anya stood before the townsfolk and chose differently, declaring that home was not a place that sold her future, but a man who saved her life without asking for ownership in return. And when Elias heard her choice, he understood that love was not loud or dramatic, but forged quietly in moments of mercy. Yet the story did not end in simplicity, because the men who abandoned Anya returned one final time, attempting to take her by force. And in the struggle that followed, Elias was wounded protecting her, blood staining the snow just as hers nearly had months before. And it was Anya who shocked everyone by standing over him with the rifle, unwavering, forcing the men to flee, proving that the woman, once left to die, had become the fiercest guardian of the life she chose. Elias survived, the valley changed, and Thomas Hale's grave no longer felt like a failure, but a reminder that even broken promises can lead to unexpected salvation. And years later, when travelers ask about the cabin that never seems cold even in winter, they are told a story about a man who checked on his neighbor one stormy night and found not tragedy, but destiny, and about a woman who arrived as a forgotten bride and became the heart of an entire valley. And if this story moved you, if it reminded you that kindness can rewrite fate, then don't leave without subscribing, because stories like this, stories that shock, heal, and stay with you, are only just beginning on this channel.